just have to keep in mind that digital transformation is not fundamentally about changing your technology. It's really about strategy, about leadership, and about new ways of thinking. Every business that was started before the internet faces a challenge today of how to adapt and transform to compete and thrive in an increasingly digital economy. And this is really a very different challenge for these existing businesses than for what is the needs of a startup. But what I increasingly found the more I looked at businesses was that digital transformation is really not about technology. It's actually much more about changing, not upgrading your IT, so to speak, but upgrading your strategic thinking, changing your thinking and your way of leadership. Today, digital technologies are transforming every aspect of business for us. And so I really think we have to rethink and reassess our assumptions and our fundamental ways of thinking about really 5 broad domains of business. We have to change and look back at how we think about customers, how we think about competition, how we think about data and innovation, and value. What is our value to the market? When we think about customers, there's been a broad shift, and we've seen it in some of the companies this morning, thinking about customers in a very different relationship. And I talked about this in my last book, The Network is Your Customer, how we've shifted from a mass market model where value was created through economies of scale, communication and innovation was broadcast, it was a one-way direction to the customer, and influence and brands were really created by the firm. And now, of course, we've moved to a world where it is much better understood if we see our customers as a dynamic network, which we are participating in. We heard Daniel this morning talking about Kind. Last year, we had Aparna Mukherjee, president of Pepsi Snacks, talking about their brands like Doritos. Very different products, you could say, within the space, but both of these brands realize that their brand is not something they create solely themselves. It is very much something they're thinking about. How do we engage the customers? How do we bring the story to life through them and make them a part of the story about our products as well as we are? All right, the second area we really have to rethink about is competition. We're moving from a world where we've traditionally thought of business as a competition between similar firms, a zero-sum game where for me to win, the other companies that look just like me have to lose or win a little less than me. And in fact, competition today is very different. We're moving into a world of frenemies and co-opetition where the same company that you may be competing fiercely with may also be your closest partner who is most vital and you are partnering with extremely closely. We're looking at a world where asymmetric competition means that you are not just competing with companies who look like you, but with companies who look completely different than you, have a completely different business model, but are solving the same problem for your customers. So if you think of a big global firm like Hilton Hotels, right? You would traditionally say, who's their competition? Well, it would be folks like this. Intercontinental Hotel Groups, Accor, Marriott, similar product lines, right? They have similar sub-brands of hotels with different levels of accommodation, similar price points, very similar business model and structure, assets, costs, et cetera. Today, they have a very different kind of competitor as well, right? Airbnb, started by 3 college grads, had a little free time on their hands. They were actually trying to solve a problem of their own, just like Daniel talked about. They first were trying to figure out how to rent out their own apartment to make a little money, and then they wound up creating a platform for other people with the same need. And what's happened with the story of Airbnb is a story of incredible, phenomenal growth because they've been based on a platform model. They're bringing together people who have a space that they're looking to rent out and people who are looking for a different kind of travel experience than a traditional hotel experience. And as a result, they've been able to grow at a phenomenal rate. They have over 1 million listings from somebody's mattress or corner bedroom in their New York apartment to a castle in Scotland. But they've been able to grow with 40 million guest stays per year reached with only a few hundred employees, right? Because they don't own hotels. They don't hire staff who take care of the residences, right? With the recent valuations, they're not a public company at this point, but they're being valued by investors at the same level as a Hilton and a Marriott. In fact, from my research in the book, what I've seen is the fastest growing companies today are platform companies. 8 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world that were started since the World Wide Web all have a platform model very central, if not entirely, at the heart of the company. The third domain that we have to rethink our assumptions about business is data. We're moving very rapidly from data being long and important part of business, but something that was really focused on operations. How do we manage and improve the operations of our business so that we can gain better insights and better margins, et cetera? Instead, data is actually becoming a source of value creation. And this requires us to gain, in many cases, a much more holistic view of our business, a much more holistic data view of our customers, and bring this to bear to create new opportunities that didn't exist before, and really seeing that data as a strategic asset. Much like a brand, your data as a business is something that you need to grow over time as an intangible asset that's going to create future opportunity. Just one example, I've seen this in healthcare and in government, airlines, a lot of retail service industries who are taking this holistic view of the customer. Interesting one, I spoke with Tariq Shaukat, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Caesars Entertainment. They own various hotels and properties, most well known though for their casinos, particularly in Las Vegas. And they have really taken what used to be data, it was a loyalty program, right? You get the card and you check in when you make your reservation, get some points, and it would go into a database. And it sort of had this very functional role. And now they've expanded it into this complete view of the customer. And they're using it to understand what drives the most important factor for them, which is how do you get people to come back just a little bit more frequently? Right. If I can get you to have such a nice stay, such a great time on your experience with Caesars, that you will go from visiting me 1.4 times a year to 1.6 times a year, that is a huge win for the business. And that is what they're focused on. So they now can actually tell when you come in, and I'm not talking about the whales, the super affluent, gamblers flying in from Macau or something. I'm just talking about a repeat customer who's been to their property a few times in the last 5 years. You come for a visit, they know you're a valued relationship. And when you swipe your loyalty card to buy your food, and then you swipe it when you go to the blackjack tables, they can see if you're having a bad time at the blackjack today. They can see that your luck is really, you're on a bad streak. They don't want you to leave saying, wow, maybe I should try a different hotel, next time. Maybe I should try a different casino. So they'll actually push out a message in real time based on crunching this data to a service person on the floor. And they're given a budget. And they're told, you know what, I've got $50 to cheer Lisa up so that she at least feels like it wasn't a total loss today. And they have discretion. They can offer her a steak dinner, maybe tickets to a show, just do something to sort of, reach out and let her know that the company cares about her. Innovation is the fourth domain that we really have to think differently about in the digital era if we've grown up beforehand. Because traditionally, innovation was a process really based on big bets. Big bets based on intuition and senior leadership, seniority often behind. How do you make this big decision, and it's inherently high risk, and you go for it and you see what happens. Instead, we're shifting to where innovation is much more a process of rapid experimentation. And digital technology is making this experimentation much more flexible and continuous than was possible before. And so the role of leadership shifts from being the decider-in-chief, the person who makes the big tough calls, to the questioner-in-chief, the person who poses the right question that the business will then go out and seek to understand and find answers to. It's all about creating an organization oriented around constant learning. But an experimental approach can be seen in a lot of companies these days. One of them is Intuit. And we had this story from Karen Hansen. She shared it here at the Bright Conference. She talked about Deepa Bachu leading their team, their emerging market team in India. And they were trying to focus on a very specific challenge. This was that question, right? That magic focusing question. How can we help Indian farmers, because Intuit serves small businesses with financial products, and the small businesses of India are predominantly farmers. How can we help these Indian farmers and raise their income 10%, right? That's the question we're going to focus in on. And so they sent the team and they did a lot of investigating of how the market worked. And what they found is you have a lot of small farmers who are growing perishable products, and they take it to a market, but it's difficult for them to get to a market. By the time they get there, they meet with an agent, a buyer called a Mandi agent, and there was absolutely no transparency You'd meet one-on-one, and the agent would give you a price, but they would literally cover their hand with a cloth while they're speaking to you so that none of the other farmers could see what they were offering you for your products, right? And they very often did not even have the time and the resources to go to multiple markets because of the difficulties of travel. And so you wouldn't know if you were really getting the best price for your product. So there was incredible lack of transparency. They said, there's got to be some ways we can improve this. So what they said was, here's our question. What are some possible answers? And they came up with multiple ideas. They thought one idea was, well, what about something like an eBay, right? A buyer-seller auction, that's a great model for getting people to match up more efficiently within a market. But when they tested this in theory with a prototype, what they found was it wouldn't work. The buyers were not willing to offer a price until they actually saw the product. They said, well, it depends on the condition and the quality of the produce. So this was not the right approach. Then they tried, well, could we do a system that improves supply-side crop information? That doesn't require the buyers at all. We'll have the farmers share information about what they're growing and when and where, and so you can understand what might be most in demand, what time of year. And they tried that, and they presented the idea to the farmers, and they really discovered the farmers weren't sure how to act upon the information. They said, this is interesting, but I'm not sure I'm going to change my decisions. So I said, all right, so that's probably not going to be the right approach. Then they had the third idea was, what about a text message-based system to match up buyers and sellers? So literally, you would send in a message saying, here's what I'm looking to sell right now, and other people would send in messages saying, here's what we're looking to buy today, and a matching algorithm would figure out, it doesn't know the exact price, but what's likely the best market for you to go to, where there seems to be a track record, other people are getting good prices, et cetera. And maybe that would be more efficient. Of course, there were assumptions in here. Could people even read the messages? Many of the farmers were illiterate. They did not build a huge system. They did not build the algorithm. Right? They had one guy sitting in an office with a whole bunch of cell phones and reams of paper, taking down orders and comments and texting people back manually, just to test the concept. And what they found was that it seemed to work. Right? They actually got the buyers to use the system. They got the farmers to use it. Everyone was happier with what they were finding. And so they moved forward with it. They actually found, by the time they had 1 million customers up on the platform, that there was a 20% increase in the income. Right? This comes from a very different approach. Now, the key takeaway that Karin shared about this is that when you take an experiment-driven approach to innovation, you don't magically become smarter. Your ideas do not get better. The rate of your ideas failing is still the same, but they fail earlier. They fail much earlier in the process. You learn much earlier, and so the cost of that learning is much less. And so you're able to actually, for the same amount of money, test and develop and explore many more innovative ideas and figure out which ones are really going to open the door to opportunity. Now, the last domain I want to talk about is value. And the shift from thinking about your value proposition as something static that's defined by your industry to something that is dynamic. From something that you defend with barriers to entry to something that you're looking to and expecting to continuously adapt and evolve based on the needs of the market. Where you see all this change in technology not as through the lens of how does this affect or challenge my current business, but through the lens of how does this open up the opportunities for my next business, for my next aspect and stage of my enterprise. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is a great example of an organization that's thinking this way. They've been around 164 years, and they're really starting to rethink what is the role of a museum in the digital age, right? How does all this technology and the way we use it, all these digital behaviors, how does it change the role that aesthetics and culture and history have in our lives and the way that we can relate to them? And so they did a very smart thing. They stole away one of our favorite people here at Columbia University, Sri Srinivasan, my friend who was in the journalism school for many years, and brought him to the Met to be their first chief digital officer. Really thinking about how do we experience art differently. Digital media opens up new elements of storytelling. It used to be a piece of art arrives at the museum and it goes through months of preparation and restoration before it's put on the wall. And that was the first time anyone ever got a peek at it. Now this is part of the whole process. They're using video to document the story of what happens with an acquisition, how it's prepared, how you get it ready to share with the public. And they found that people are really interested in this. People all over the world are watching these videos and these stories. They're creating interactive experiences like games. This was aimed at younger visitors to the museum. Murder at the Met, so it's a mystery game where you have to figure out, who done it, who did the mystery, and there's a series of clues, but all the clues you find them by going to a different artwork, famous artwork like Madame X from John Singer Sargent that's in the museum, and by actually looking deeply at and engaging with the art, you find that next step in the message. They've even done things like hackathons, where they opened up all the data they've created around the artwork. And this was a performance multimedia artist in Brooklyn, actually, who created this. You can go on this site and you pick a song from Jay-Z or Kanye West or Drake, and it's got a few songs loaded up. And as the song plays, it's picking out words from the lyrics, and it's searching in real time this database of all these tags and all these attributes, pulling up works of art from all over the world, from throughout history, that align with and are evoking these same themes and these same images of the lyrics of the song. And Sri talks about this as, we're a strong museum. People look to us. We're not in danger of sort of being eclipsed by other museums. But our competition is not other museums. It's Netflix. It's Candy Crush. We're fighting for attention, and so we're rethinking about what the role and the value that we can bring to our audience is in the digital era. So if we look at these 5 domains, they can really provide what I think of as a playbook for understanding what transformation may look like in any different industry, different kind of business that existed beforehand. In the book, I have some strategic planning tools for each of these 5 domains, and I have 2 more at the last chapter of the book about disruption. How do you identify disruptive business models? Because they don't all fit the traditional sort of classic theory of disruption from 20 years ago. And how do you respond? That there are actually opportunities and options to respond to those threats if you are facing one. Because, if you ask the folks in Silicon Valley, the conventional wisdom is, these old companies that started before the internet, there's no chance. They're all dinosaurs. It's just a matter of time. They're all going to die off. The Ubers will rise and replace them all. And certainly there's reasons to take that negative view at times. You can certainly find the examples that are commonly spoken of, right? Kodak, incredible, many years lauded and valuable brand, which missed the opportunity of where things were going in its industry and eventually went bankrupt. You look at Blockbuster, the retailer for videos, rentals, and how they did not respond and recognize where things were shifting with Netflix, and they went bankrupt. You look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Such a long heralded institution of knowledge, 244 years before they finally closed down, stopped printing their last print edition, their 30 volumes editions, and they said, we're not going to do this anymore. Except actually in that last case, they weren't disrupted. What happened was the company has actually changed completely. Wikipedia wasn't even their first challenge. They went through a lot of threats, from Microsoft Encarta to Wikipedia to digital websites, and they went through a really wrenching process of several years of trying to figure out, look, how do we continue to be valuable to our core customers, to educational institutions, to educators, K through 12, and to select, families who are really interested in having a premium educational resource at home. And eventually they've settled on a new business model where they have a subscriber-only paid online option for the families, and they have a whole new suite of constantly evolving educational resources for teachers, which include developing new curriculums and assessments based around Common Core and other changes in standards in education. And in fact, the President Jorge Calles has commented that, yes, everyone noticed when we stopped publishing our print set because it was such a historic event. But the reason why we did was it was such a trivial part of our business at that point. By the time it happened, it only represented 1% of our business, and we're actually as profitable now as we've ever been. So the story, I think, of Encyclopedia Britannica is that disruption is not inevitable and that businesses can transform. We just have to keep in mind that digital transformation is not fundamentally about changing your technology. It's really about strategy, about leadership, and about new ways of thinking. And any business, no matter how many years you've been around, and no matter what industry you're in, I fundamentally believe that if you can change and think differently and learn to challenge your assumptions of how you understand your customers, your competition, your data, innovation, and value, then any enterprise can transform and find its next path to growth in the digital era. Thanks very much.